Steve Bannon has said that President Trump might run in 2028 and is confident that President Trump would secure a third term as an incumbent. Now, what's really interesting about this is that President Trump is term limited, and I actually want to see what this would look like on an electoral map, because I think this would be a very wild card scenario where he's able to run again. Now, to clarify, he is term limited. The only way that this, I think, could be changed is if they somehow get the amendment passed, which, if that is hypothetically the case, I think that they'd actually renominate Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris in this case would be able to use the argument of, you see, look, he changed the Constitution. I told you he was going to do this and this. They had a very big fear-mongering style campaign on the the threat to democracy that Trump was. And I actually think if Trump ran for a third term, rerunning the candidate who was hitting him on those issues, I actually think would be strategy they would try to go for, not realizing that Kamala Harris is even more unpopular than what she was even in 2024. And so, looking at a possible third run for Donald Trump, how this would look like on the electoral map, I already have it kind of pretty much really laid out here for the most part. He does not improve in the Electoral College. He actually loses states in the Electoral College, albeit I do actually still have him winning the election. He still manages to win the Electoral College because Kamala Harris is just that weak of a candidate. And Donald Trump overall is a pretty strong candidate. He's got about a 48% favorable rating at the national level. And so this is something to keep in mind here when you're looking at, just this hypothetical matchup. And even when you look at more accurate pollsters like, Atlas Intel, or Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Report, so you look at Rich Barris, Donald Trump has like a 50 to 53% approval rating. And so the main problem here, I think, would just be some independents may actually just get turned off for voting for Donald Trump just because he's running again for a third term. But I think that the Republican base would really enjoy him running again, and I think that it would just kind of energize Republicans to turn out. But I do think there would be a lot of Democrat pushback, a lot of independents that are very turned off by this, particularly a lot of millennial voters I think would not like the fact that he'd be running again, and even some plus 65 voters. But I think that the young vote would actually shift even further to the right than what it was in 2024. And so when you look at this hypothetical map, Donald Trump wins Utah. It is a lot closer. Donald Trump won the state by 22 points in 2024. And when you look at it here, it's only a 14.5 point win. So it is over 12 points, but it does shift to the left considerably. And I wouldn't be surprised by this just off the fact alone that Utah is a very, Mormon, Republican state, and it does have a lot of rhinos in it. And so I think that they'd kind of leverage this to try to get some people to switch over, although I don't think it'd be successful in making it a swing state. But I would not be against Utah being a swing state possibly if Trump ran again, just because I think there'd be a lot of weird things that would happen in Utah in that case. Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska except the 2nd congressional district. If you actually look at it, it's barely over 12 points, the 1st congressional district there. Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, these would all still be in the safe column. The margins would be closer in a lot of these places. Harris would improve nationwide. I actually even have her winning the popular vote. I think Donald Trump gets about 76 million votes, and then Harris would get about 79 just because of this independent pushback against Trump having a third term. A lot of these left-leaning, right-leaning independent constitutionalists, even if the law were to be changed, I think a lot of people would just kind of be turned off by the fact he's running again and that he got the rules changed. And this is coming from somebody who supports, President Donald Trump. I think that him running again would definitely be very questionable of a move, considering I do think that there would be a lot of people who may have just voted for him, just based off of vibes. And I think that a lot of independent voters, and even particularly some right-leaning independents, I don't actually think would like the idea for him to run again. South Carolina is still in the safe column, as well as Florida. Florida's about like a point closer. It stays about the same. Iowa and Ohio are also about a point closer-ish. I know like Iowa is. Ohio is actually about the same. It actually moves to the right by like 0.2%. So, Ohio, Iowa, and Florida are all still in the safe Republican column there right now. And that is pretty much it for all of these safe states, because Maine is actually in the safe Republican column there. So 176 safe electoral college votes for Harris. She's got California in her column. It is about a 20-point win, so literally no movement in the state like whatsoever. Basically ends up being the same result. Washington does end up moving to the right by like a point and change, but it still will be in that blue column. I do believe Oregon is also in the safe column. This one I actually think moves left by about 0.3%. Colorado ends up moving left as well. It is almost a 13-point win. So, Colorado is definitely, going to be a liberal state moving forward. And I think under this circumstance, I think it would probably even be closer to 15 if you actually, to be honest with you. I think it'd be about a 15-point win in reality. Illinois, New York, all these states would still be safe. Illinois would shift, to the left by a decent amount of points. I think a lot of people in Chicago would probably not turn out for him. New York stays about the same from where it was last time. It literally just does not move at all. So, New York is trending right. It is going to be a semi-competitive in the 2030s, in my opinion. Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, all these states are over, 12 points. I can't really see them exactly being, in that column there. Maine's first is in the safe column as well, including Hawaii. So this puts Harris at 177 safe electoral college votes, leaving a bunch of states up for grabs in the likely column, lean or tilt column. Texas is in the likely column at just about 10 points for Donald Trump. I think you would see him hold his ground in the southern border area. However, I do think areas like Tarrant, Williamson, those areas I think would nudge a little left again because of the fact that he'd be running for a third term. I do think that some of the rules would move to the right in this scenario. So it does produce about a 10-point win for him in this timeline as of right now. I think in the state of Alaska, you have about a 12, it's almost 12 points, but not quite. It's right below the safe column. It does shift like 2 points to the left. I wouldn't be surprised if Alaska ended up being a lot closer in this scenario. Virginia is in the likely column now. It is over a 6-point win in this scenario here. So it does shift a little bit to the left, but it also, like by literally half a point. It doesn't even shift to the left by that much. It's just like half a point. You'd see some of the rules trend right. Some of these, exurban areas move right. But again, these DC suburbs would just keep moving left. So that's where I think that comes in. New Hampshire is interesting because it is a 7-point win on this map for Kamala Harris. And I think this would just be because the state is very anti-incumbent. It does not like incumbent parties. And I think if Trump tried running again, I just think they'd be very turned off by a third Trump term. And I really just think it wouldn't even be competitive at all. I think Harris would even probably win it closer to like 8 or 9 points. I think it'd be a fairly solid win there. New Jersey, about a 6.9 percentage point win, so a point bluer than 2024. I think, Trump would hold his ground there, but you would see some reversion, maybe some movement in suburban areas like Morris. I think you'd probably see those move left. So basically almost about the same as last time. And in the state of Arizona, you see the exact same margin as last time. So the margin would basically stay the same. You'd probably have some very minimal movement in Maricopa, to the left, but you would see like Pima would move right, Santa Cruz would move right, so many other places move right. I just think that it kind of washes out and it ends up being about roughly the same margin of victory as it was in 2024. Nevada, a 3.9 percentage point win Now, in the state, actually, you have to put Arizona in the lean column because 2 to 6 points is in the lean category. So Nevada would be about, give or take, slightly redder than the last election. I actually think Trump probably does worse in Washoe, but improves in Clark. And I actually think in this election, I think he'd end up flipping Clark County by the end of it there. I think North Carolina ends up being a little bit over 2 points. It shifts a little bit to the left from last time, but Trump still holds his ground in the state of North Carolina there. In Minnesota, you see a 5.8 percentage point win for Harris in the lean column, just below a likely margin for Harris. She does improve in Minneapolis. Trump does do better in some rules, but Minneapolis just zooms to the left because of the fact Trump is running again. And we see Nebraska second is in the likely column. It is a decent win for Harris, 7 points. So Harris be winning it by 7. Maine is an interesting one because this one has been on the radar on the model as trending left, and even the voter registration trends are looking good for Democrats. But you see Donald Trump only loses the state by 4 points, so shifts left by roughly, give or take, like 3 points in the Republican direction. I think that Trump would just end up doing better in the state of Maine as of right now, according to the model at least, and so that's what you're seeing there. And then we come down to some of the more important states. New Mexico would end up being a 2.5 point win for Harris here. Trump, I think, would improve with Hispanics. He probably ends up winning the Hispanic vote in the matchup. That's what I have the demographics looking like. I think he probably improves with Hispanics. But the white college vote would just zoom to the left in this election. That's why Colorado, Virginia, New Jersey, New Hampshire kind of just move left by quite a bit here. But I do think non-college whites would shift like a point to the right here, so that's why Trump kind of holds his ground pretty well in a lot of these states. And looking at the Rust Belt trio in Georgia, Georgia ends up voting for Kamala in this election by just 0.9%. So it's really close. You'd see weird shifts in the rules. Some would move right, some would move left. But I think Harris would improve enough in Atlanta and get more votes just to barely pick off the state of Georgia. And in Wisconsin, I think Donald Trump ends up losing the state of Wisconsin by about 0.5 point. I think the wow counties would just zoom to the left. You would see some improvement for him in the rural areas and even in like the northwestern part of the state where Ashland is. I think he'd get close to winning some of these counties. I think he'd probably even possibly pick up Ashland and be on the table. But I think the wow counties would just zoom to the left by so much because of this third Trump term. You know, I think that they just wouldn't. I think they'd be very turned off. The voters there, I don't think, would be very fond of this idea, and I think that it would break off and it would actually vote for Harris. However, Michigan does stay with Donald Trump. Donald Trump does underperform from 2024, albeit very narrowly, literally by like 0.1%. And you would see some suburban areas move left, but Detroit, I actually think, keeps moving right. And you would see third parties eat into the Democrat margin here. And Donald Trump would even pick up a lot of those, Muslim voters in this election as well. So it's kind of a wash from the shifts there. And then in the state of Pennsylvania, I actually have it here as a 3-point win for Donald Trump. So he ends up winning it by like almost double the margin that he did back in 2024. I think you'd see some suburban areas move left in the state, but like Philadelphia, I think he'd crack like in the high 20s. I think he'd do a lot better in the northeastern part. And so I think because of that, he ends up doing a lot better. Voter registration in Pennsylvania is looking really good for Republicans, and I think that his campaign would also spend a lot of money because I actually used the tracker here with the events and the spending here, so this is actually factored into the election as well. And so I actually think that he'd spend a lot of money here, he'd campaign a lot here, and I think because of that he ends up doing significantly better in Pennsylvania, because I think at this point he would want to just try to war game out, like, okay, how am I able to win the election? And through that, it would be Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Arizona. in Nevada, because even if he were to lose Michigan, he actually still ends up winning the election with 271 regardless. And so in my humble opinion, I think Trump does underperform in a third presidential bid as an incumbent who's term limited. I think the only way this could happen is if he somehow gets it appealed, and he just gets the third term through a change of the 22nd Amendment, which would be incredibly difficult. But I did think that this would be fun to speculate on to see what would happen, because I definitely think Virginia would be closer to like 8 or 9 points for Harris. I think she'd do a lot better there. I think Maine would probably be likely Dem in reality. Maybe Minnesota's likely. It really just depends on the Rust Belt. I do think Michigan he'd do better, but Wisconsin, I think I'd be very worried about that one. And Georgia, I'd also be worried about that one as well. And so if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.